Well, good afternoon, good evening. My name is James Ezzell, like Alan said, and I work with Amy at Bombo to Sykstus, Tanner, and Ezzell, and I've been there for a while. We do a lot of bankruptcy, obviously, and a little bit of VA work, a little bit of Social Security work, and I handle all the Social Security business that we do. I started to become familiar with Social Security disability back in law school. I used to do some volunteer work with abused children, and a lot of time that abuse would make them disabled, create disability. And so I started to become familiar with it back then. I graduated and went straight into it, and I've been practicing it ever since then. The Social Security Act is vast with any kind of governmental legislation. And disability is just one small part, but it's still pretty extensive. And consequently, tonight I'm just going to sort of give you a general outline, fairly broad overview of exactly what Social Security disability is. I'm going to cover four subjects, four topics: Social Security disability, Social Security disability practice, in my opinion, the upside of disability, Social Security disability practice, and the downside. My handout more or less covers this. This really goes with a PowerPoint presentation that I have, but it's still pretty technical, but I think it'll be informative, and like I said, it sort of follows along with my, my talk. What is Social Security disability? As many of you know, basically it's a check disabled individuals get each month. On occasion, their kids also will get benefits as well. And usually Medicaid or Medicare attaches to it, which really helps out in getting them treatment. So it's very important for individuals who are not able to work to get busy and get started on this thing, get it filed. In the past, I've worked with more full-service law firms, and so Social Security disability sort of dovetailed with our representation of individuals in workers' compensation cases and motor vehicle accidents that just sort of go hand in hand. There are two kinds of Social Security disability. Disability insurance benefits, which is sort of a work-based benefit. It's based on the premiums that you pay, that Social Security payroll deduction. Each paycheck goes to pay what are called quarters. Essentially, you've had to work 5 of the past 10 years and pay those premiums fairly regular in order to qualify for it. What a lot of people don't know is that you can lose your benefits. If you wait too long to file, beyond that 10-year period, even though you may have paid in $50,000, $100,000, you're no longer allowed to draw benefits. They call that your date last insured, and if you miss it, I mean, it's black letter law. There's no way around it. The other type of disability is supplemental security income, and that's sort of a needs-based disability. It's kind of like food stamps. You can't have too much household income, too much property in order to qualify for it. Needs-based is usually the way they describe it. Applying for Social Security disability is actually pretty simple. You can do it over the phone. You can do it on the internet these days. You can do it in person, but I advise people to use the phone because it's easier to talk with somebody live. And if you actually go down there in person, you have to wait forever to get an appointment. So over the phone is the best way to go. There are two standards for disability, the adult standard and the child standard. What Social Security does is they take your application, they send it over to the Disability Determination Service in Birmingham, and then they farm it out to medical experts who in turn engage in this what they call a 5-step sequential evaluation process. And I've got that on page 2 here, I believe, in the handout. And it's a fairly complex process. There are a lot of pitfalls. A lot of people get tripped up in it, and ultimately that's whenever they come see me. And I'll kind of run through it real quick to kind of give you a general idea, like I said, of what is involved. The first step seems pretty simple. Is the individual engaged in what they call substantial gainful activity. And basically what that means is, are they working full-time? Now, a lot of people think that, in order to draw disability, you can't work at all, but actually you can work part-time. How much money you make, how many hours you put in, that will affect whether or not you trip this particular step. But if this individual applying for benefits is able to pass it, they're not engaged in substantial gainful activity, they proceed to the second step. And I got a good definition of SGA here on page 3 as well. Second step, the sequential process, if no substantial gainful activity, does the individual have a severe impairment? A severe impairment, just about anything qualifies as a severe impairment in my experience. I don't think I've ever had anybody tripped up at this particular stage. If you have diabetes or high blood pressure, just about any kind of a diagnosis will get you past it. anything that's expected to last more than 12 months. A lot of people think there are temporary benefits or short-term disability. There aren't. You're either permanently disabled or not. And so Social Security doesn't have something that, if you've broken a leg in a motor vehicle accident that would just last 6 months, you're either all in or all out. And in order to kind of give you an idea what we're talking about in this next step, I have a table of contents. If this individual who's applying for benefits is not engaged in substantial gainful activity, they have a severe impairment, then they proceed to step number 3 is the severe impairment disabling per the listings? And the listings are basically a codification of just about any kind of diagnosis you can imagine. And I have them here on page 5. Let's see, for example, number 2, musculoskeletal system. That covers all your arthritis, your back problems, that sort of thing. Digestive system. We're seeing a lot of people these days with IBS, Crohn's disease, colitis, that sort of thing. Number 12, mental disorders. That covers depression, anxiety, any kind of a schizoaffective disorder that you can imagine. Now the problem is, and I can show you here on the next page, page 6, the criteria contained in these listings is pretty extensive. A lot of times people will go to the doctor, get diagnosed with depression, for example, and the doctor won't do 10 different kinds of tests. They won't take extensive notes. Basically, they'll just write down this person is depressed, has a depressed mood, depression, that sort of thing. What Social Security has to see is here on page 6, A, B, C, D, all these different criteria, and whenever they go to review the case, if they don't see this, you get turned down. Now, miracle, the person's able to go to a specialist, and the specialist takes detailed notes. If you do meet or equal this particular listing, the process stops there and you're awarded your disability benefits. But that rarely, if ever, happens. I mean, just about everybody I see, the records are kind of spotty, unless the doctor's working hand in hand with an individual, it's not necessarily important for them to be real detailed in their record keeping, and this is where it kind of comes back and bites them on the rear, so to speak. Now, like I say, if they meet or equal this listing that they're claiming, the process stops there. If they don't, it goes to the 4th step. Let's see, no substantial gainful activity. The individual has a severe impairment. It doesn't meet or equal the listings. Despite the symptoms associated with their particular severe impairment, can they do any of their past work? And what they do there is they go back 15 years and look at everything you've done for a living full time. It needs to have lasted longer than 3 months. And again, there's some wiggle room there, work attempts, that sort of thing. But if they can do their past work, they're not disabled. The process ends there. And if they can or they can't do their past work, then they proceed to step number 5. Can you do any other work? And you don't have to have any history of this work. It's just basically they'll take a look at what you've done in the past, and if you have any what they call transferable skills to other jobs, and they think, even though you've never done it, they think, one time perhaps you were a truck driver, you can't drive trucks anymore, but they think you might be able to sit there as a security guard and view monitors, and you're not disabled. So there's a lot of hurdles that you have to clear. And at this point is usually whenever they come to see me, when they've been turned down. And I have the child standard here as well on page 11. It's essentially the same, except with the work components. There they look at whether or not the individual has developmental problems. Are they having problems at school, problems with authority, that sort of thing. So anyway, we go through that process. Just about everybody in Alabama is turned down. I think the success rate is somewhere around 20 or 30% in the state of Alabama. And if you throw out all the individuals who are obviously disabled, that are missing limbs, that are blind, that are bedridden, that sort of thing, your chance of success, if on appearances, if you're whole, is pretty low. What I look at when people come in, I take a look at exactly what stage of the process they're at. Your best chance of success with an attorney in the state of Alabama is at the hearing level, which is the first level of appeal. There, I believe the number is around 60 or 70% approval, and I think the reason it's such a big gap there is because once it gets to that level, once there's an attorney involved, the judges actually take a better look, the experts do, and actually look at the case itself for the merits, rather than, I think, in the lower levels of the process, they just kind of pass along, try and get it off their desk, so to speak. So I take a look and see what stage of the process they're at and make sure that it's still timely to file an appeal. You're allowed 60 days, 65 actually, in case it gets lost in the mail, but 60 days to file the appeal. On occasion, They allow you what they call good cause to file it late, but really we don't want to do that if we don't have to. I take a look and see if there are any merits. In other words, if an individual has kind of a skin condition or carpal tunnel, that sort of thing, more likely than not, they're not going to, no matter what stage of the appeals process you're at, they're not going to find you disabled. Now I have a list of all the documents. I won't go through those. Like I say, this is for a PowerPoint presentation at CLEs that I do, but there's a lot of paperwork involved, just as with any kind of governmental process. We're only allowed, as far as attorneys go, we're only allowed to charge 25% of what they call your pass-through lump sum benefit. Basically, when you file for disability benefits, you lay claim for benefits from that date forward or from your alleged onset date forward. And eventually, if you're awarded, you get one big lump sum going all the way back of the benefits you should have been receiving during that time period. And we're limited to 25% or $6,000, whichever is less. We don't get paid if we don't win. So that kind of works as an incentive, I guess, for us to get out and actually do stuff. Well, you have an alleged onset date for disability insurance, well, for both, but disability insurance benefits, the work-related disability, you can go, I believe that you start accruing benefits, I think it's 12 months after your alleged onset date, and then with Medicare, I think you got to wait 24 months for those benefits to kick in. Now, I don't get involved in the computation of benefits and that such, but that's my understanding. SSI, the needs-based disability, you start accruing benefits from the date of the filing, no matter what your alleged onset date is. And so, I take a look at all that, make sure we're timely, et cetera, et cetera. I always certify mail my documents because Social Security loses everything. I've had them lose entire files, and I've had to go back and give them copies of my file. It's just, there's so much paperwork involved. It's amazing that they don't lose them more often, but what can you do? I try and maintain close contact with the client. Every time they go into a doctor, I order medical records. And again, this is sort of helps the process along because I can't really rely on them. They don't have money. They don't have any money to pay for medical records. So as long as I foot the bill, everything will be timely. And the reason being, I try and line up support from their medical providers. Like I say, oftentimes the records are spotty or there'll be criteria missing, and I send out what I call these doctor letter packages to the physicians, the primary treating physicians. I ask them to look at the criteria, and if they feel this individual meets this particular listing, if they could put in a writing, explicitly track that language. Then I can go to the judge and say, here, Judge, we need a ruling on the record because all this criteria is there. It's included in the records at this point. And so if I'm up to date with the medical records, then we can get that ruling on the record. Document everything because, like I say, they'll lose everything. And sometimes the client becomes confused, part of the process, that sort of thing. One of the good things about these hearings is they're private. If you go to any state or federal process, there's a gallery of spectators, people watching your business, that sort of thing. Here, you don't have to worry about it. When they come in, I kind of explain that to them, try and alleviate any kind of anxiety they have. There are usually just 5 people in the courtroom, me, the client, the judge, vocational expert, and the court reporter. So you're not going to have a lot of people sitting there laughing at them, eyeballing them, that sort of thing, and that kind of helps them relax a little bit. Unfortunately, once you get into the hearing, it can be up to 2 months or more for you to get a decision. These days, it takes about 1.5 years to actually get to court. And so you got another couple of months to wait, and sometimes that's just too much for the clients. I've had clients pass away during that time period, disappear, that sort of thing. Anything can happen when you're talking about that length of time. Generally, the hearings, like I say, they're private. We'll go through a series of background questions, and I'll elicit direct testimony from the client. I'll talk about their diagnosis, the symptoms associated with them, that sort of thing. The vocational expert there doesn't exactly involve herself with the client. She just testifies about what types of past work the client's done. Again, to look at that, if there are any transferable skills, that sort of thing. Again, it takes a couple of months for the decision to come out. Pretty lengthy. They have to trace all the treatment, so that can take a while. And unfortunately, if we lose, we have to go to the Appeals Council, and that's another 1.5 years or so. Then District Court, 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it has to be a pretty big issue for us to go that far, because like I said, your best chances of success are there at the hearing level, and they sort of decrease as you go through the rest of the process. Again, cases are decided on the Social Security Act, case law, that sort of thing. I've got a list of all the criteria here on page 14, I believe. that the judges base their decisions on. For me, as far as the upside goes, I've done some work in the past, adversarial type work with motor vehicle accidents, that sort of thing, and it seems like people invariably are interested in revenge on occasion. Here, like I said, it's usually not adversarial. It's more of a fact-finding exercise. It seems like we're helping people in need to get those benefits going, the medical benefits as well, not only the money. Once you get your process in place, like I have here, say here, you're not really reinventing the wheel. Once you get your process in place, it minimizes errors, and in the end, like I say, clients are usually appreciative. It's always been my experience that in criminal law and domestic law, clients are never happy with the results, particularly in divorces, that sort of thing. But here, if you win, the payoff is great for the client, and like I say, the attorneys do well as well. Now, the downside, I mentioned it a little earlier, it can take a year or more to get to court. And like I say, that sometimes can be fatal. I've had individuals who were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, stage liver disease, that sort of thing, and they just can't make it. In the meantime, there are limited community resources. I refer people out a lot to crisis services, but there's not a lot out there, and Alabama doesn't really have any welfare system. People can get unemployment, but as I have here, page 15, Part D, whenever you swear that you can't work and file a Social Security claim, when you draw unemployment, you swear that you can work, but you can't find a job. So those are conflicting oaths, and the judge can hold that against you. Sometimes he can discount that past due lump sum. So same thing with workers' compensation. They look at that as double dipping, incarceration, double dipping, private long-term disability. If you're fortunate enough to have that, a lot of times they'll want your lump sum payment as well to kind of compensate them for what they paid you during that same period of time. And also, if people go back to work, again, that's violating the first element, but that happens. In a year and a half, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and to put food on the table. And that is a brief outline of Social Security disability. Thank you for your time.
Have you found that the recent regulations that they've passed about the fatal diseases, the end-stage, like you said, the end-stage cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had the commission's been working on that. Have you found that that sped up any of the? They've had
Right.
Meetings.
Sometimes, we'll have rocket dockets on occasion. We don't really have those anymore, where you have these slam dunk cases, sort of like what you're talking about now. Really, what they've been doing lately is bringing in judges from out of state. We're just so overwhelmed here. Like I say, it takes about a year and a half to get to court here in Alabama. Atlanta, I think it's 4 years, and that's on the second stage of appeal, not the entire process, just getting to the court. And I think at one time it was like 8 years up in New York, but they were sued, so that they kind of got that cleared up. But no, I don't. The only thing these days that seems to accelerate the process is all these out-of-state judges coming in, and it seems like they want to get those files off their desk pretty quick. So you get a lot of rulings on the record, more so than we used to.
I thought they were doing something specifically with those. The fatal disease, the diseases that were
not, in my experience here,
ending in death. That were certain to end in death.
Not in my experience, not here yet. We're behind the times a little bit.
All right, we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
I have a nephew that has a chemical imbalance, and he cannot work. He started at 18 years old, and he's about 28. And when you look at him, you think there's nothing wrong with him. But if he applied for a job, he cannot. He just lose everything. He just falls.
Now, are you talking about depression or some kind of physical?
No, he's it's sort of like a muscular type situation.
And you're wondering if that's something that...
Well, he's been on disability
Okay.
for the longest. This is in the state of Florida.
Okay.
So I was wondering, do they evaluate you every year or so often?
They can, and on occasion they'll try and cut you off. And so you really got to be on your toes. You only have 10 days to file your appeal to keep the benefits going.
Well, he's had it for almost, I guess, 15 years.
There are some people, the judges will recommend that each case be, that particular case would be, reevaluated to see if there's been any improvement. But in general, once you're on, and again, I'm just talking in real broad terms, most of my clients don't get taken off, even under the reviews. But if they do, are reviewed locally there at that with a disability determination specialist, I'll be happy to work with them, to make sure that they stay on. Because again, once you get your system down, you're not reinventing the horse with everything, so you know exactly what you need to do, minimize mistakes, and keep them on the benefits.
Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. Well, let's see. I want you to take this.
I don't think I need that.
Well, you're very welcome. Go ahead.
If a child is diagnosed as disabled or with a permanent disability, before age 24, could she draw or he or she draw disability from deceased parent?
There's survivor benefits, right?
Yes.
And so if that individual's on disability at 24, what they want to do is see which pays more. And they may be paid more on the disability than they would on the
No,
survivor
I'm talking
benefits.
about if they were, could they draw survivors? I mean, from the, because they were disabled, they've
adult
never
you're talking
worked,
about?
yeah.
No, not usually. It's 18 and younger for survivor's
18 and
benefit. That's
younger.
again, that's outside of what I do. I'm strictly getting people on disability, but that's my understanding. They'll cut you off there at a certain point. But yeah, if the person was on disability, and there's a certain different standard, like I was talking about earlier, that changes once you're an adult, and so they may try and cut them off then. But again, you just got to get an attorney and get in there and appeal it real quick to maintain those benefits. But they will try and cut you off at that stage. And then, like I say, the survivor's benefits is also cut off there as well. That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Alan.
James.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
so